I have had a very big guilt week this week,
Oh,
and my
more
blood
so than
pressure is high.
usual?
Yeah, I feel more so than usual, and my blood pressure is high again, which tells me that
That's
I'm,
actually true.
yeah. hmm
What's going on? What's your
So
guilt, Amy?
I know, I know.
This is
I've
a safe
been,
place, Amy.
I know. It's multiple things. I think the top thing right now is my guilt about living far away from my parents,
Oh,
but also guilty because I'm happy that I live far away from my parents.
oh, that's a conundrum.
Yeah.
That's
So my
dichotomy is
parents are in their early 80s.
yeah.
My dad's 82, my mom's 81, and they lived in the same house for 55 years. And we moved them this spring, summer into a condo finally.
Mhm.
My dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's a year and a half ago and has had quite a few challenges since then. He's physically slowed down a lot, can't drive anymore, doesn't want to use a walker, but should probably be using a walker. And cognitively, he's still extremely sharp with past memories. He could tell you 1,000 stories about 1,000 things with like the most minute detail.
Yeah.
However, his short term ability to process is not quite there anymore. It's like also he's really anxious about things because I
Yeah.
think he's not remembering. And so now I'm in charge of all their finances, which is fine.
Oh
I
my.
don't mind doing that. But he's constantly asking me
Right.
about the same things over and over. And I'm like starting to feel really impatient about it and like, oh
Mhm.
my God, I don't have an hour and a half a day to be on the phone with you talking about
Yeah.
the same shit over and over. But I feel so guilty saying that. But it's like, I can't do anything of my own because I'm like exhausted,
Yeah.
emotionally drained from dealing with all this. Anyway, so feeling guilty because like since the move, things have been very challenging for them. But I know the move needed to happen. And so my sister and I both feel like guilty about moving them, even though we know it probably should have happened sooner.
This takes me back to my women's studies degree, which I did in the 90s. And I can't recall if it was the 100 level class or a sociology of the family class. And probably it was both, where there were conversations that either the professor wanted to have about women balancing multiple demands on their time in terms of family, and women, older women who were taking the class and wanted to discuss that very thing. And at that time, I remember feeling so dismissive and just completely did not believe that this was a valid feminist concern.
Yeah.
And holy cow, like, go back and eat your words, because it's such a dichotomy, right? You've moved your family and yourself to the place that you want to be and you're happy there at the same time that you have burgeoning, right, big demands on your time that truthfully, and I'm not saying something I don't think that you're not aware of, but that are only going to grow in terms of the time suck,
Definitely.
energy and emotional, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Amy.
And I feel it's funny because, like, I say my sister and I are dealing with this, but of course, we have two brothers, but they don't live near my parents either. Only my sister lives there now. And my two brothers, one lives overseas, one lives way up north. They're lovely guys, but they're guys and they have young families. They're older than me with kids much younger than mine. And so their whole focus is that right now. And they are not involved in very much of what goes on for my mom and dad's day to day. And I think they don't even have a clue. And I don't know if they feel guilty about it. Maybe they do. I know I asked my husband the other day, I'm like, do you feel guilty about leaving your parents? Because we both moved away from our parents. And his parents are the same age as mine. They're in slightly better shape. They're in their own house still. And he was like, not really. He's like, I feel a little bit of guilt that I like don't get to see them very often anymore. And he doesn't make it home like maybe every couple, 2, 3 years is the most he gets
Oh,
home to
yeah.
see them
Yeah.
because he's busy working so much. But I take the kids every year. And he's just like, no, I'm glad we moved when we did because he's like, otherwise we would be having to deal with that all.
If we teased out like all of the threads of what we're talking about, we are hitting so many things. Like we need about 7 days, right? Because there's the sibling dynamic, then there's like the male female levels of guilt and levels of care and attention. Then there's the differences between families, right? like how one family handles and who's
Yeah.
responsible. There's the age of siblings, there's location, family relationships, like how
Yeah.
was it growing up in a house for you, right, is different from how it is for each other person in the family because your parents are
Totally.
different people, right? I'm always
Totally.
telling my kids that when they say something's not fair.
Hmm.
And then there's the societal, right? The shift, the move wherever we want to, and then the independent, right? Like all the things that make it great to be Canadian, right? Kind of the Western value of like
Yeah.
individualism and independence, accept that, then what does that mean later? And how do we feel about that? And how do you hold that, right? Because you
Yeah.
don't want to be interdependent and, that takes a village type thing. And most of us don't. But then there's these gaps where culturally it's really hard.
And in North American culture, we have made a business of not taking care of our own parents and elderly people.
Mhm.
Like, we definitely, compared to a lot of other cultures in the world, don't want to have to deal with that. But I can see why, because it is exhausting. And then it's like, am I going to spend my best years, caring and dealing with all of this?
I'm trying to think how like a different culture might make the argument that how we've set it up is wrong, right? You live in a culture where kin is kind of that's the high value. So kin. And then that means that when our kids are little, we have, right, there's a family support that I don't know if you had it, but I had some, but
Yeah, I did, for
not to
sure.
the extent, right? Not to the extent of like a kin base where your parents actually live in the same house as you, that sort of thing. And then maybe you're not as tired when your parents are old because you had more support for the years, right? Like I'm kind of worn out, but then we lose the things that like I value a lot, the independence and the make your own way and the idea that if I could move, wanted to move, I could move, and
Yeah.
that's a reasonable expectation. And both my brothers also live not in the same city. And so now it's just my mom. Yeah, I hear every bit of your guilt that you feel.
Yeah. And it's also like we moved when we did 8.5 years ago when my parents were still so active, so well. And we kind of knew at the time, if we don't do this now, we'll get stuck here.
Yeah.
Because also in my family, like my sister and I are the main caregivers, but if I were there, it would fall more to me because my sister is very busy in her career
Yeah.
and
So the
she's better at
flexibility.
prioritizing. Like she does a ton for my parents, but I feel like if I were there, she would happily allow a little bit more to fall onto me. And rightfully so, probably. But I just know that's my role in the family is like I would pick
Yeah.
up the slack. So that was selfishly, which is also why I feel guilty. Part of the reason we moved away when we did, because we were like, if we don't do this now, we're going to get stuck here and we're going to be the ones caregiving for everybody.
I remember thinking when we would talk about potentially moving over the years, it would come up and it was this really exciting idea. But part of my hesitation for sure was the thought that both of my brothers live away and I have two parents in the city. And so that was definitely, it was not, the ultimate reason we didn't move for sure. And my mom, I wouldn't have discussed it with my dad, but my mom would have never, she was do whatever, it'll be fine, all of that, right? So there was no guilt or pressure even hidden from her.
Lucky.
Well, there were other things. Right, but there was no pressure, but it was like an internal, like this is something that's kind of been on my mind. And then when my dad was not well, he was not well forever, years, shall I say, but not well for years and needed a lot of appointments. And that was my mom managed most of that, but there were times when she needed support, and that was just me automatically because of proximity. And I never like it was one of those instances where you just drop everything and that's not even a question. And so it didn't bother me. And there was
Yeah.
never a time where I couldn't do it. But now he's died a year and a half-ish ago. And she moved from her little condo that was really close to where we live back to the farm, which is not, a 2-hour drive from my house. We argue about how long it takes to get there, Amy. She says it takes like 20 minutes. I say it takes 32.
Semantics, Kristen.
Right. So let's say, it's not far, but it feels aggravatingly difficult to get there. And I feel immense guilt over how frustrated I was when she decided she wanted to move, and I'm trying to work through it every day, but I'm still annoyed, and I don't feel like it's my place to be annoyed, because if someone tried to tell me where to live when I was 75, I'd be like, "Fuck off."
Yeah.
Right? And so
The
it's
only
her
thing I
choice.
would say to that is having now gone through what we did with my parents, who could not be told anything, and they have now railed against everything. We've had to kind of push them into this. They waited too long, and now they've both said, "We waited too long. You were right. We probably should have done this 5 years ago because we could have then done it on our own terms more." And the
Mhm.
only reason we pushed it now was basically like, if you don't move now, you're not gonna be in a condo on your own, you're gonna be in some type
Ex
of level of care home, which I know you don't want, and if we get you out of the house and into a condo that's more manageable, there's a better chance of you staying independent for longer, and so that's what finally got them to agree to it, but the amount of work that went into doing that, as you know, my parents are collectors of all kinds of things, borderline hoarders, but antiques galore and
Yeah,
all kinds
the
of vintage stuff.
unpacking and then packing,
Yeah, and
right?
it
Like,
took us literally a year and a half to get them downsized to the point where we could move them, and many trips back and forth for me.
and isn't it interesting that I can feel all that work, right? Like that's physical work, that's time, and that's also very emotional energy of yours, of theirs, of everyone in the family. I can hear all that, right? And if we made a little chart, it would be so obvious that there's been so much investment, that's a terrible word, but like by you
Yeah,
in all of this. And yet we're talking about how you feel guilty about that.
I know, because I still feel like, "Oh, I should do more. Should not feel resentful that I had to do all that." Anyway, working on that because that has been it's just been like one challenge after another in this condo association. Oh my god, don't get me started about condo
Oh,
associations. It's been a
my relatives
fucking
are very anti condo associations. And that was the number one worry when my parents moved from the farm to the condo,
Yep,
was the fact that they were choosing, after years of being like, we will never, right, to live in a condo with a board and
yep,
people. And truthfully, the amount of good stories they had, they were really fortunate. There was only, I think, like, let's say 22 condos in this little thing. And most of the owners were original, or
nice.
right. So it was like a well-oiled machine, but there was one person who was like an actual lunatic
Yep,
that caused immense distress. And
yep,
now I imagine, right? And you're aging and then having to deal with people who are not their best selves in group
yep.
settings. And then these condos were built in, I don't know, 70s, 80s. So now the costs increase. Yeah, all of my relatives have multiple stories about the terrors of, I don't know why anyone even sets up a board anymore.
I know.
Just seems like a recipe for bad things to happen.
And anybody who like, I feel like it attracts the very worst power hungry
Mhm.
people to be on the board. My parents have met some super nice people living in the building,
Yeah,
but there are 2 in particular who are associated with the board that are just nightmares.
yeah.
And
That is now Amy's portfolio.
yeah. And
Amy.
so then my sister's like, "You should get on the board so that you can," and
No,
I was
my
like, "I can't.
sister
Like, I can't feel
possibly
guilty about one more thing, but I cannot physically do that." I was like, "It would make me ill, Natasha." I was like, I could not. I think I would have a stroke. I
I put
couldn't."
forward the motion that Natasha goes on the board.
She
Also,
doesn't have the time. She
talk shit.
would, but she doesn't have the time. Anyway.
Yeah, I've been feeling guilty because I get like ideas and then get really excited about how I've solved a problem. And so
Yep.
my solving this summer was that, so the land where my parents' farm, my mom's farm, was my grandpa's land, and then she got a chunk, and it was bare, bald prairie, and they turned it into like an oasis out there and planted trees and watered those trees over the years, and it's beautiful. And my mom has always loved being outside and doing kind of like work out there. So she spent the summer, as she did when I was younger, at which time I paid no attention. But she spent the summer trimming the tree lines. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with a farm tree line, but she would have piles of branches that are as big as my garage. And then she'd hire someone to come in and get rid of them. But I don't, like, she loves doing it. it's physical. She's outside. Like it's happy. But then it's like, you know what I'll do is I'll take one of the girls or whatever girls are around and we'll go out there once a week and we'll clean her house because it's a way for me to like, the love languages. I don't really remember
Yep.
what mine is,
Mhm.
but my way is like doing things for people
Acts of
maybe.
service.
Yeah. Okay. So this
Mhm.
was like my act of service where,
Yeah.
and I don't really particularly like cleaning my house, but I don't mind cleaning someone else's house. I get much greater satisfaction out of that. And so I'd haul my Dyson out there, which was also really satisfying because it's a farm. So there's a lot of dust. And then she didn't have to worry about that, right? She could just be outside and do her
Yeah.
thing. So we did that twice. So every week. And it wasn't like she asked me to do this, right? No one asked me. And she was actually like, what are you doing? Why? But yeah, I don't need you to do this. And then I could tell she was just humoring me. She's like, all right, I'm fine. But if this is how, right? If you want to do this, you do this. And the amount of guilt that I have that I am not on a regular schedule, that I have not done this, that I have not upheld this bargain that I made with who? Myself is unbelievable. And then it's like guilt that spirals out into, okay, not only am I not doing this thing that I want to do for my mom and want to do, also feel like I should do, but I'm also not taking my kids out there and kind of, here we are. This is what we do. This is how we live. We give back. We help. And look, here's your Nana. Go say hi to Nana. What's right? All of that. Because my grandparents, when I was young and we lived in the city, they lived up the block, both sets. It was work for me to walk 2 blocks to go to that grandma's instead of 3 houses to go to the other. And so I have all of that joy. And now my mom lives, let's say, 27 minutes from my house, and my kids don't go out there on their own. It's kind of like up to me, and I'm not doing this. And it just actually, all of this makes me crazy. I wasn't even thinking about this when I was thinking about this conversation this morning. And thanks for that.
Sorry. Yeah. It's funny though, isn't it, actually, when you talk about, and I know everybody's experience with grandparents is completely different, but like you talk about having yours close by. My grandparents lived in the same neighborhood as us. I could bike over there. I wouldn't walk very frequently, but I could bike over. And that was my mom's parents. And my dad's parents lived in a small town. But we visited them quite frequently, like a few times a year for sure. And then they would also come into town.
Yeah.
And I have like the fondest memories of like playing cards out at my grandparents and contract rummy and crazy eights. And my grandpa fished almost every day. And I would go fishing with grandpa and I would bake with grandma. And my grandparents in town, my mom would often drop me off there if she had
Yeah.
errands to run. I spent so much time with my grandparents. And when my kids were really little, they did spend quite a bit of time with their grandparents because when we owned our business, our
Mhm.
retail store, once the kids were school age, Jason's mom and dad actually came in and we paid them to babysit. I could have never had them do it for free. I would have felt way too guilty. So
Yeah.
I even still felt
That's
guilty having them come in, but
beautiful.
we paid them and they enjoyed it. So, like, our kids did when they were little spend a lot of time with their grandparents. But since we've moved away, we moved when they were 8 and 11.
Yeah, that kind of rupture, hey?
Totally. And it's like, was this the right choice for us personally? I think it was. And the kids are happy that we moved. But for sure, my daughter does say a lot, oh, I miss like the big family dinners and having occasions together, which, twist the
Yeah,
knife.
sometimes when I think about that, I pretend in my head that this is equivalent to when people used to get on a boat, right? And maybe leave grandma behind.
Yep.
Uh,
Jason, my
Like,
husband, has had no grandparents. He met one grandma one time. His two grandpas died in the war.
mm,
At least that's what he thought. We found out later that his mom's dad actually lived till he was 80 in France. She just
oh,
lost touch with him after the war. And that's
wow,
a whole
that's
other story.
heartbreaking.
Very interesting. But his one grandma died before he was born, and his other grandma lived in Germany. And he met her, he remembers her meeting her once or twice. So, like, for him, having grandparents was
Right.
like, he actually,
Something, yeah, other
like,
people had.
yeah. And he also was like creeped out by old people. He was scared of them, like,
Well,
because he had
because you're
never
not, right?
interacted with them.
Yep.
And like I grew up with, grandparents. My great aunt, who was a
Yes, great
spinster,
aunts.
lived alone, never married, never had kids. We cared for her well into her 90s when she died. And I used to have to go with my mom and sit like,
Yeah.
for hours having tea with Auntie Jean, who was actually never nice to us. So this is a total guilt thing. My mom would be like, oh, poor Auntie Jean, she's all alone. And you'd have to feel guilty. So you'd go. Well, I would because I was the only one still at home. But like Auntie Jean was pretty mean to me always. And in hindsight, I think the reason she was mean was just because she was alone and lonely and crotchety
Happy.
and probably not a very happy person. And her life didn't turn out the way she thought. She was nicer to us towards the end because I think she realized like we showed
Oops.
up. But yeah.
Yeah, it's weird when like we're living through, I mean, everybody is, this is such a dumb thing, but like living through history, but when things have been the same and they're the same for a few generations, you have a sense of how things were, how they are, and how they'll be.
Yeah.
But how things were, how they are, and how they'll be is we don't know, which is true for everything, except that it's kind of more true, right? Because unless there are civilizations, right, where we just aren't aware that this was how it all went.
Yeah.
Like my expectation, my storybook picture would be huge family gatherings all the time, everyone making these efforts. And, you have the crotchety old aunt that's a grouch, right? But it's like, you expect to have the crotchety old aunt who's a grouch. And for my kids, I've started tapping now because we're in the city and my brothers are not in the city. One's in BC, one's just in a different part of Saskatchewan, but they don't tend to make a whole lot of efforts to come this way. And then my brother that's in Kelowna, they have, but their kids are really little and it's probably just an awful lot of work for them to travel. So we don't see them a ton. And then on my husband's side, we really don't see them at all. And so it's like very sparse in terms of family feel. And I really miss that. Like I felt like it was not ever enough that I spent time with my cousins and grandparents and all those extended, great aunts and uncles. Like I adore them. And when I look at pictures, and I'm not doing that for my kids. So I've been tapping my cousins and their families and kind of turning them into that.
Yeah.
And, if we're having Thanksgiving rather than have like my mom, which would be the extent of it, I'm now, often I'll invite like my cousins and I tell my kids, just those are your cousins.
Yeah.
Right. I'm kind of redefining that relationship that probably I'm sure we saw my mom's cousins, but it was not, there were so many other relatives that would have just made it 150 people,
Yeah.
it was too much. But for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to strengthen those bonds because partly for me, but also partly for my kids. Because I think there's something about, we always talk about like you choose your friends, right? And so if someone isn't a good friend or a good person, you can kind of figure out a way to not have them in your life. And I want my kids to say, yeah, maybe that relative, particularly like them, but family's family.
Yeah.
I feel like there has to be value in that. Like it makes you sort of tolerate. I mean, unless of course, right? Always the caveats like abuse, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But
that's hard too, because it's like the whole concept of you can't choose your family, right? And so you want to provide them this thing, but you don't want guilt attached to it. Like, oh, you should love them because there's value here because they are your family. But at the same time, it's like, but if they don't, should they feel guilty that they don't? Like, just because you're related, do you have to like the person?
No.
Or do you have to find value even in spending time with them? It's a hard thing, right? Because like you want this for them, but do they want this for them?
I don't really care what they want. I don't. Because if I think about what I wanted when I was 17, like I would have been like, yeah, see what the fuck? No way am I, right?
Fair.
I would have had a zero interest in, like, even if you tried to explain to me why this could be important, I would have been like, what's that thing people do with the Snoopy, the teacher?
Yeah.
That okay.
Mama, mama, mama.
I never did see that because we weren't allowed. But I've heard it enough.
You
Look at me
didn't
calling up
miss anything.
cultural
I hate
references.
peanuts.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't like them. Snoopy, it's like the dumbest, it was the lamest cartoon I felt. So you didn't miss that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes me really happy.
Yeah.
'Cause
Every
I
time it
did.
comes on, I'm like, ugh, no.
Won't it come on now because it's Halloween?
Yeah, it will. And I will not watch
Is it a
it.
Halloween or is it a Christmas?
Both.
Oh,
There's a Christmas and a Halloween.
okay. I will not watch them.
So don't waste your time. If you have, I can pick other ones for you to replace what you missed in your youth.
Thank you. I would like a curated list.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you.
We actually, like, since moving here, and we don't have family here in Kelowna, we have one set of friends in particular who also doesn't have family here. And so that is our like
Yeah,
Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, whatever,
I love that.
occasions. And the nice thing about this is we chose each other. There's no guilt because everybody pitches in. We'll be like, "Hey, do you want to make this time? Do you want to host this time?" It's like whatever is good for everybody is great.
Yeah,
And we can't do it on Sunday because we'll be away. Could we do Saturday Thanksgiving this year? Sure. And this year
yeah,
we planned Thanksgiving together. And then at the last minute, like 4 days before, we decided to come back to Saskatchewan to see the family because we felt like
feel guilty.
guilty because we hadn't been home for a holiday in a lot of years. So we were like, let's just do this. We have the time. We did it quick and dirty. But I had to I felt terrible because I was like, oh my gosh, now I have to call Steph and tell her.
Right.
And I was like feeling so guilty about it. I'm like, now I've ruined their Thanksgiving because now they won't have Thanksgiving. And she was like, of course you have to go. She was like, it's
Yeah,
completely fine. She's like, we support this. Like, there was zero guilt. And I don't know. And I knew there wouldn't be, but I don't know why I allowed
because
myself
it
to
doesn't
just,
come with all that baggage,
yes,
right? That
yes.
sometimes we might like even insert, right? I sometimes wonder how much of I feel guilty that I go on a holiday and don't include my parents.
Oh,
That is a big guilt thing for me, but my mom doesn't care, or she tells me she doesn't, right? And she's pretty honest. So
amazing.
I generally trust, right, when she says that she if she's gonna not tell the truth, she'll say it with a certain tone.
So you
Right.
know,
But I think she'd actually sometimes rather not go on a holiday
fair.
with us because it's probably annoying, but I still feel guilty. Like we're talking about like going on a last winter holiday before all the kids are too old and gone and whatever else. And I had mentioned it to her and she told a bunch of other relatives who then told me that she didn't want to go. And even
That's nice.
knowing
That's
that,
convenient.
right? But even knowing that, I'm looking at it and I'm feeling guilty. That makes no sense.
No.
So I'm like inserting something.
That's amazing because, like, my mom would love to go on a holiday with us, and I could never go on a holiday with her. Yeah,
Why? Tell me. Like,
I love my mom. She is like,
she's pretty fun.
she's a lot though. And I know I'm a lot. I hate when people say, oh, you're a lot. And then, anyway,
I feel like we're both a lot,
we're
and
both a lot, and I'm okay with
we
it.
get to
But
define when we're a lot, though.
yeah, and
Yeah.
she's a lot in other ways that just,
Yeah.
she's a person who has no time management. And as a child, I mean, there were literally
We
times where
suffered
she would
that.
drop me off to a piano lesson. It's a half-hour piano lesson. Like, not that far from our house. I could walk probably when I was younger, but in the wintertime in Saskatchewan
Yeah.
and -40, no. So she'd drop me off, half an hour would go by, I'd be done my lesson. I'd stand upstairs waiting in the house. I'd go outside for a bit. I'd come back in. It was too cold. Sometimes the next kid would have already been and gone before my
Oh,
mom would be back to pick me up. Like zero time management.
Amy, I'm not enjoying this conversation at all because I wasn't feeling guilty about the old people thing. And now I am more, well, I was, but I hadn't thought about it. So now it's like fresh. And I have very little time management, and my children suffer and will reiterate like 39 times what time they need to be picked up. And then they'll double check, and it irritates the shit out of me, except that it's true. And I've forgotten them multiple times, just forgotten to pick them up or not been home, the kindergarten bus where they make sure they get in the door.
And
Yeah.
the guilt you must feel when you're not there,
Oh, yeah. When you realize,
enormous.
or when your neighbor has your little kid at her house across the street because she saw her just standing on the lawn looking confused.
Baby.
So thanks, Amy. What
I'm
else?
sorry. You know what? It is hard, and it's something maybe to to work on. Although your kids are older now, so it's fine. But I know it's something that that has
Yeah.
been an issue with my parents. They've been married 58 years, and my dad has always been on time, and my mom has never been on time. And I remember as a kid, my dad would be out on the driveway, pacing and biting
Oh,
his fist, trying to he always had high blood pressure, and I'm thinking holy shit, now that I have high blood pressure, I realize like that anxiety and that internalized like
Rock.
everything that he just would bite his tongue and be like, Maureen, are you ready? And then like, they would go and my mom would be like half an hour late going to something that was important and had a start time. And she just didn't give a shit. And it's like, I wish that I had a little bit of that level of obliviousness. It's not, I think she would care if she knew, but it's like she just has no awareness that, like, she can't not brush her teeth. She can't not, like, there's all these steps she has to do before she leaves the house where I'd be
Right.
like, okay, well, my teeth don't get brushed today because guess what? We're going to be late. So for me, that is like, obviously, I get heated about it. It's something that
I'm not
in my
so
childhood
basically,
really bugged me.
Amy, basically, I think what you're saying is my children are not going to take me on trips when I'm old.
Basically, yeah. Yeah. Because we did go on one trip with my parents to Hawaii when the kids were really little. I think Juliet was like 10 months and Seb was 3.5. And we actually had a nice time, but it was very much like on mom's schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I had little kids, a nursing baby and a toddler, I would still be ready sooner than my mom to go places.
Yeah.
And I know that, like, for Jason, he cannot handle that. And we would not still be married if we had to take my parents on trips. It just would not work. So,
Yeah, I struggle with the time management thing consistently. I don't know, forever. Some of it is like I like to do all the steps, although I can leave some out, right? And I'm getting better at sort of like getting ahead of myself. Not perfect though, not even close. But also like Jade, my husband, he struggles with time management, which doesn't really make sense because he's very organized and analytical. But for him, he has a concept that time expands to fit whatever needs to happen. So my children are getting it from both parents for different reasons. So that's a little bit, this is distressing on a level
I'm
that I hadn't
sorry. I'm adding
considered.
to your guilt load today.
That's okay.
I think, what's funny about it too is I feel it the most now because when I was a kid, I dealt with all that. And then as a teenager, I was like consistently like leaving things to the last minute with school. I was a huge procrastinator and I still am in life. And it's something that I've been working on. And I used to be late consistently to like, but not very late, not like my mom, but like always like 3 to 5 minutes late
Right.
because it was like, I can maximize my time and just do
Yeah.
one more thing. I think I can fit this in. And then, oh shit, there's traffic. It took me 3 minutes
Right.
longer.
Yeah.
I was always trying to like, instead of being early and wasting time being early, I would be like, okay, I can do one more thing. So as I've gotten older, I've tried to be kind of shift that a little bit to like, this is actually disrespectful to other people's time when I'm saying my time is more important and I can show up late.
Yep.
And it's not intentional. I always felt guilty if I was late or whatever, but it was just like, I just tried to shift that a little bit. And I know my kids hated to be late, like really hated to be late.
And I think I've done that to them because I've made them be late, right? And then they're carrying, which not their burden, but it becomes, right? Like I put the monkey on their back by making them feel awkward and having to walk in late. I'm getting a nervous stomach just talking about all this, but it's probably very good, right? If I'm getting a nervous stomach, I need to deal with this.
You probably need to address something.
Yeah.
I think there was one time particularly, and this really made me kind of try harder too, because my parents, when we owned the store, when we owned our retail store, my parents used to take the kids on Saturdays because Saturdays was our busiest day, and then it was good to not have the kids around. So my parents would take them. And then one year it was my kids' little Christmas music recital. And we made it so that we could leave for like the hour of the recital, leave our staff at the store, but we knew we had a limited time, so we had to get back. So told mom and dad, this is the time, have to have the kids there dressed and ready, like all the time in the world. We get there rushing from our business.
Yes.
The concert's literally starting. My mom's not there. My kids aren't there. My husband was livid. He was so mad at my mom that day. I thought he would never speak to her again because Juliet hates to be late. And
for
here they
something like
rolled
that,
in and she was vibrating and she's already shy. She doesn't want to go up. She was so angry and vibrating. I could barely calm her down and she almost missed. I'm trying to think if she did. Anyway, it was not good. So that was like kind of a turning point for me to be like, okay, I need to make a better effort to not do things like my mom has, and
Yeah.
like to realize that this is actually important to people and it affects more than just me.
My turning point should have been, and this is like if I have the list of, right, like top 10 guilt, this is within the top 3 for sure. Like the lifetime guilt things. It was my mother's funeral. So my grandma's funeral, and I was late. And it was because I just didn't start getting ready early enough. Then instead of just, I'm sure it was one of those instances where, oh, I don't like this outfit, right? I don't feel like I look good. So I took off and put on probably 15 things and just left a mess. And then there was traffic, and this was before maps, right? So I knew where I was going and probably should have left early to accommodate for the fact that I didn't know what traffic would be like. And I was stuck in traffic and I was late. I think I was 20 minutes late.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
And they
significant.
held it. And I
Oh God.
remember they were like, oh, you're here. Right. So who had to walk up to the front pews of the church to sit with their mother on their, like, honestly, the
And this
amount
is
of guilt.
pre-kids for you, obviously?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this
Oh, good. So it's not even the excuse of having to
no,
get little
no,
children
there was
ready.
no excuse at all. So not only was I not there, like, in advance and didn't ask any questions about, like, logistics or can I help or anything. Obviously, I did not even have, like, a clue, and then roll in 20 minutes late. Like, I actually feel horrific about that.
I think the most amazing thing to me when you tell that is like, if that was my family, the guilt that my mother would have heaped on me, I mean, it wouldn't have even been an option. I'm just like, in all this, I'm like, wow. But you felt your own guilt. That's what's
Oh, yeah.
amazing to me is like
No.
you actually just taught yourself that. It wasn't like your mom made you feel that. You just like internalized it yourself. And that's amazing to me. I don't know if it's good or bad.
I don't know either.
Like,
I don't know. I mean, it's a good thing that I felt guilty or I would be, right? Like
for
psychotic
sure.
maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly thrilled that I feel guilty, but but yeah, like that was just terrible. I'm thinking back and they used to go, they had a friend who worked in Oman. And so they would go kind of to the Middle East, to that area for like a good chunk when they would go, right? Because it's far and they would go for 3 or 4 weeks. And I remember that my grandma had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing treatment, and there was like lots of conversations between my mom and her sister about should I go, and my grandma too, and the idea was yes, go, everything is going to be fine. And then I remember my aunt calling me to say, you need to call your mom and tell her to come home. And
Oh
I
no.
had to call and be the one to say to my mom, you know, you need to come home. And I don't know, I sometimes resented when they left. I resented. So I don't know if there was some of that muddled up in there. And I actually don't think I deserve that much credit that I was somehow reacting against resenting her going. I think it was more just I mean, and it's funny because I managed to show up for work on time, right? Because the rule was where I worked, the rule was if you're on time, you're late. So I was consistently not late.
See, and that's impressive because I worked for 3 and a bit years in a government job that I really disliked, but I was never on time. And like not very late, but like just like
Setting it
5 minutes
I feel like
consistently.
5 minutes does count technically as late, but it's like a Canadian late, right?
Yeah,
Like if I
fair.
invite you to a party at my house, and I was explaining this because it's funny because I'm teaching comms, right? And either comms or like business comms or interpersonal communication stuff. And we talk about especially if I'm teaching international students, but we talk about kind of concepts around punctuality and how to explain the idea that Canadians like punctuality, right? We generally agree that if a thing starts at a time, right? Your dinner
Yes,
reservation, you show up on time. But if
absolutely.
I invite you to a party and I say come at 7 o'clock, that is not what I mean at all, right? We have a different time for that, right? My mom shows up at 1 minute to 7. If I say come to a party, she shows up at 1 minute to 7, and it annoys me before it's even happened because I'm like, I don't know how many times I'm like, okay, everybody needs to be ready, and Nana's gonna show up in like 1 second, and they're bing bong, right? Here I am. And I'm
See, and
like,
I'm the person who would show up on time to the party because I'd be like, you go get dressed while I finish whatever shit you were doing in the kitchen or help you. That's my,
he wants to help. If
yeah.
someone invites me to a party for 7, I'm like, I feel like the time actually means between 7:15 and 7:30.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But everything else, like time should be time. And I'm teaching these stupid communication classes, and I had to say, the theory is if you're on time, you're late, except that I am a terrible example of this. And no matter what, I'll start strong at the beginning of the semester, and then somehow the other day I was driving and I start teaching at 4:30, and I have to park in a parking lot thing, walk, take an elevator, right? Like it's not, just dashing in the front door
Yeah.
of somewhere. And I'm like, oh, start teaching at 4:30 and it's 4:17. How is this going to work?
Well, I mean, you'll get there eventually.
True. I'm proving the rule.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really think I can swing that.
Yeah. Oh, this stresses me out though, the talk about punctuality and all those things. So I definitely, and my daughter to this
Good. You
day,
deserve it. Yeah, it
she,
carries the weight of our.
yeah. Oh yeah. And she guilts me all the time. She'll be like, and don't show up at like blah, blah, blah time. Like come right, 5 minutes before. And then so many times I'm sitting around waiting for her to come out of dance
Oh,
or
yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, glad I got here early.
Yeah.
But there was one time, so like when we first moved here, and the traffic is quite bad here sometimes. And so sometimes you legit can't help even if you leave early. You just might be a few minutes later, but not much. But like, she was always panicked about where was I? And at this point in time, she didn't have a cell phone to check in on me. So, she would, and then I'd show up and she'd be like, oh, I was worried something happened or whatever. And I'm like, Juliet, I'm always coming. Like, just know that I'm always coming. And I'm like, it's literally 2 minutes past the time. I'm like, if you'd had my mother, you'd be still here an hour from now. So just don't even talk to me.
Yeah.
But there was one day where I actually got into an accident.
Oh.
Someone rear-ended me really badly, and I was fine, pulled over to the side of the road. But of course, Juliet didn't have a cell phone. And so I luckily have this one wonderful friend here. And I called Steph. I'm like, okay, I'm totally fine, but I've been in an accident. I can't get there to get her. Could you go and grab my kid for me? She's like, absolutely. So she went. But at this point, it was already like the bell had rung. She would have been outside, in a panic. And of course, then when Stephanie rolls up, Juliet had a full-on panic because, oh my God, every time she said to me, I thought something happened to you. And I was like, honey, I'm always fine. I'm always coming. She was like, this time something did happen to you. And so she after that, I could never be late because she thought if I was late, I was dead. Like that was in her mind, that was the equivalent. So yeah, if I was late, I felt like the most horrendous guilt because I knew that she was vibrating about it. So I just couldn't ever be late again.
Charlie's trick is because she's in track and they were outside for cross country training and it's scheduled to end. Let's say, I can't remember. Let's say it's scheduled to end at 7. And so I show up at 7 or 5 after and I'm like, you're fine. Just if I'm not there right at 7, like that's life. So just suck it up, buttercup. But sometimes then the coaches started ending like a little bit early. And so then it was like this panic of loosey goosey. We'll come at like 6:45. And I'm like,
I hate that.
Gosh, right? Like, and then what? And so I would sort of aim for that, but consistently not there till at least 7. And I'm like, you're fine. And she just started phoning me and I'd be in my car on the way, right? Because now she has a cell phone. And I'm like, why are you calling me? I'm just checking to see where you are. And I'm like, do you not have my location? Because that's step 1.
Yeah.
But it's that lack of control, right? I guess when you're depending on this person to be there and to be fair, a person who is consistently not there. It's probably fair. So there are several things I could feel guilty about again.
Okay.
It's unbelievable. Jade's like, what do you mean you're doing a podcast about women feeling guilty? And I'm like, do you want a list? And he's like, well, what do you even have to, what do you feel guilty about? And I'm like, listen to the podcast. And he's like, I'm afraid.
He won't want to. I actually said to Jason, he was like, do you mind if I don't listen to it? I was like, no, I actually don't want you to because he's very honest. And
Yeah,
Like,
no, I don't want
I
opinions.
don't want your feedback because you'll be
No.
too honest.
Yeah, I don't feel guilty about not sometimes wanting to hear something like this because same thing, I don't want your feedback because also I respect his opinion. And if he said something devastating, I'd be like, oh, right? And then
Totally.
I'd feel weird and I wouldn't
Yeah.
know what to do with it. But I've also given him things that I've written and gotten feedback where then I don't appreciate.
Yeah. No, that's Jason and I are very honest with each other, but we don't always appreciate the other's honesty.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And Jade has said, who would read this? It reads like it's written by like a crazy person. And I'm like, that's kind of the point. That's the style.
yeah, it's a
Um,
choice, style
and so
choice.
then I have to feel guilty for being really angry
Mm.
because I asked.
Yeah, fair. I know, right? You can't win. Yeah.
Like, why are we fighting? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a stupid thing to fight about. I did ask Jason if he felt guilty about things, and he was
And
like, yeah, some things. He's like, mostly for him, it was mostly to do with parenting.
yeah, that would be Jade's. I'm guessing. I didn't ask him, I don't think.
Yeah. And it was like to do, he has a
Yeah.
fixation now that our kids are getting older about like
Oh,
not
yes.
having spent enough time with them.
Oh my
And I'm
gosh, that's totally a guy thing.
But it's so funny because I'm like trying to remind him, I'm like, honey, for the first like 8 and 11 years of their lives, we owned a business that they were at
Yeah,
with us
all the time.
constantly. Like we spent nothing but time with them. But it wasn't like, that we were
Quality.
spending time, quality. Right,
That's
right.
so dumb.
And then I'm
Okay.
like, we go back over videos and photos. My kids love to
Yeah,
look
you
at
have
old
to
videos and
remind
photos.
him. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I remember this. And I'm like, honey, all they remember is the good shit. They're not remembering the time you were irritated with them and were like,
Yeah.
told them to go away and whatever. And then since we moved here and he started back in film work where he works such long days,
Right.
that has really kicked in
Yeah.
because he feels like he's missed time. But I'm like, do you know that when I'm at home with them literally all day, they're at school for 8 hours of the day, first of all. And then when they come home, they don't want to hang out with me. Like
You
it's
don't
all I
get a
can do
cup
to
of
get my
tea and
daughter to
say
come up
hi.
and help me
Yeah.
make dinner. Like it's fucking pulling teeth. I'm
Yeah.
like, they're not missing you. I hate like and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like they don't really want us around as much.
They
And that's
don't
a
want that
normal,
time. Yeah.
So I'm
That's
like,
what
so lose your guilt
that
about that because they don't feel it. They don't feel that they've missed
no.
out on having you. They don't feel like you weren't around. Like there's nothing there. Like that's
Yeah,
all
there's
you.
no pressure from them. That's
Mm-mm.
that's what Jade would say, for
Yeah.
sure. That is what he would say, and it was funny because had stopped by his office, like, recently, and there was another dad in the office, and I knew that they had just taken their first kid off to university, and so I just popped my head in and said, "How you doing?" And, "I heard you drove down, and how'd it go?" And he opened up immediately about, "I just felt so guilty about not spending enough time." And I was like, "What?" Like, it must be that's
Crazy.
their go-to
Yeah.
kind of guilt, which is
Fascinating.
okay. They can have some.
They can have some, yeah, because frankly, when I asked about his parents and stuff, he was like, I felt a little bit guilty that I hadn't been home in 3 years and I hadn't seen them in a year and a half or 2 years. He's like, but also his parents, like, even if his mom thought it, she would never say it.
Yeah, they're not
She's
gonna.
not like that. So, yeah. Anyway, so maybe it's partly that it's not placed upon him either, which in my
Well, and then
family it
there's,
would
like,
be.
all that, like, kind of cultural, societal, and then biological, right? Like, how do you tease out what's what?
Yeah.
Because I mean, theoretically, I mean, the fact that we carry children might incline us to sort of like the nurturing caregiving. And when we're not doing that, I don't know. I don't know. Right. But like as a guy, like you're getting the food and killing the animal and she's going to cook it. Right. But you're going off to get it. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, is it a little bit biological that we are wired to kind of feel more guilty about the parent stuff?
Yeah.
Because it falls under
Maybe.
that category of caregiver.
Caregiving. Yeah. I think you're
That
probably
maybe
right.
that helps me feel a little better actually, that, like, I am wired to carry this guilt because it's, like, the pressure of genetics, biology versus, me just, unable to cope with all the things that I feel like I should do but can't or don't.
Yeah. I think that's actually a good way to look at it.
There, my stomach hurts slightly less now.
You're welcome. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. These are so I enjoy this.
I hope other people do. It might just be
I
our
would like
our
them
two
to, but
friends, but that's okay.
that's okay. I like it. We'll have this for posterity. Is that the right use of that word, Amy? Can
Yes,
you?
it is.
Okay.
It's
Excellent.
100%. Our youthful, glowing faces.
Yes. Although if Charlie were here, she gave me makeup for Christmas last year.
Oh,
And I like makeup, but she tells me that I don't do it very well. And so
oh,
sometimes now if I'm going somewhere, she does my makeup for me. And truthfully, she does a very good job.
oh, yeah. Yeah,
So
Juliet wears makeup. I have never been able to do makeup, as you know. And if I do 3 times a year, maybe I will do makeup and my hair to go out somewhere, and I get her to do it now because
yeah, they're really good at it.
I'm not good at it.
It's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
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 Charlie even contoured my face recently.
Oh, amazing.
I tried to do it when we were away this weekend and that I looked very
Fail.
straight. So then I had to take it all off. And then I was mad because I felt guilty about wasting makeup.
Yes, it's
Just put this
expensive.
makeup on my face and now I have to wipe it all off because I
Do you
look
know how
like
much that cost at Sephora?
too much.
Fucking fortune.
Yeah. And I feel like they make the bottles like look big, but actually maybe they're really not that big on the inside.
It's true. They put fewer they make it put thicker glass or plastic,
Yeah.
or they have, like, an insert within the
Yes.
bottle. I'm like, "Why is my thing, like, in a squirt thing in a
Yeah.
plastic bag inside of this giant glass bottle?" I'm not fooled, people. They
Yeah.
should feel guilty.
They should. Actually, maybe sometime we need to devote maybe more than one sesh to discussing the guilt that other people should feel but don't.
I like this. I want to do this because
Oh,
yeah,
that really resonated with my
I like
body
this a lot.
as much as you. So yes, we will definitely devote time to
Yeah,
our stories of not feeling guilty
yeah,
because we need to remind ourselves that we are powerful, holder accountable-ers,
perfect. I like
holder
this.
accountable-ers.